So we said RAM is a primary storage, right? And it is sitting next to the CPU so that it gives the best possible performance, right? It is volatile, and because of that reason we have the other storage, means the secondary storage, right, where it helps us to predominantly store our data, and secondary storage is cost effective, where you can have terabytes of space with less cost. RAM is highly as we know volatile, and it is costly, right? And yesterday somebody asked me, is the for swap, right? For swap, is that is the only technique used, or for the swap is it really uses only the hard disk, right? That actually depends, right? So that depends. So in the swap, when we talked about, right, some part of the disk space will be reserved for swap, right? That is what we talked about, right? This space can be taken from the hard disk if you don't have any special configurable options. So for example, today if you see most modern yes. No. Right, yeah. Okay, sorry for that. Yeah. Door receiver. So okay. So what is that I'm telling you is like in the hard disk, right? So let's say a modern operating system where you have the OS, and the OS is, or maybe the server or your computer is having two types of disks. If you're already aware of, one is a hard disk, and another small disk you have is like SSD, right? Have you ever heard about something like SSD? Right, the fastest disk basically, right? SSD. So if you have something like that, because SSDs are fastest and very costly when we actually compare with our regular disk. For example, if the regular disk is costing like 10 to 20k, right, of 1 terabyte, right, the enterprise grade disks, our SSD will cost the same even it is 100 or 250 GB, right? So SSDs are costly. But when your system is having this type of configuration where you have hard disk and as well as SSD, your operating system can be configured to use SSD for swap. Is that clear? Right? That is another way where you can really boost your system performance. The overall performance will be very much increased if you use your SSD for swap, right? So in the modern, or let's say modern or current laptops, if you have seen that current laptops are coming up with something like SSD plus hard disk, right? Why it is like that? They are trying to keep that OS on the SSD so that when you power on your laptop, it comes up very fast, right? And hard disk, you can use it for keeping your personal data and other files. Am I sounded right? Right? So why I am telling you this? That is very important. Why I am telling you this? Because being a R&D engineer, we should understand where the bottleneck is and how to enhance that, or how to improve your system performance end of the day. First we try to understand the problem statement, and we try to address that problem statement by a solution. Okay. So here the problem statement is, what is it? The problem statement: hard disk is slow, right? And to increase our existing RAM usage, we are using something called swap as a technique. Okay. If your servers are having very high RAM, as yesterday we have seen that, right? One of our server is having, let's say, around like 64 plus GB, right, RAM it is having. So in that case, though you use or though your operating system is configured to have swap, most likely it will be using your RAM only most of the cases, right, until unless you are really loading your server, right, because RAM itself is free, so it will give the first preference to use RAM. If the RAM is getting filled, then we talked about swap, right. So if it is done, then we step into a little different topic now. So right, we talked about the other day about network. In the network, predominantly you will be having a switch, right. By using the switch, you will be connecting your machines together so that they can communicate with each other, right. Okay, this is your computer 1, computer 2, and so on. And we talked about in the network, the devices are identified with their IP address, right. IP address are basically host name. So this machine is connected to this port, this machine is connected to this port, this machine is to this, and this machine is to this, right. Now I can say all these 4 servers are in the same network. Usually if the configuration is something like this, you can call that as a LAN, local area network. So in the company or in your office, right, wherever you are working, like this, there will be so many number of switches. Each switch may be having like somewhere between like 24 to 48 or even bigger number of ports, right. Like that, there will be so many switches may be connected together so that they have a bigger networks. But end of the day, if the network is connected or the switches are connected together, that makes a single network connection, right. If you are getting it, I have 2 switches, let's say, and switch 1 and switch 2 both are connected using a cable, then it is a single network. It's not 2 networks anymore. But if the switches are separate, not connected together, then they are 2 different networks. Okay, na? So now let's talk about that words as words. Let me put it here. In the network, what is that we'll come across? IP. You're able to see the size. Somehow this size is very less. Okay, now it is good, no? So IP address, and one more thing you will come across, subnet mask. Right, default gateway, primary DNS and secondary DNS. Okay, no? So you are able to follow me, right? In the network, what I am trying to tell you, usually you come across these type of words. For example, your IP address, if this is your machine 1 IP address, machine 2 can be 126 or 127 or anything like that, right? So in this, if your address is something like this, usually you can consider. So I'm not really talking exactly in the network terms, right? So I just try to give you a picture where you can understand the things rather than knowing in depth of network understanding, right? That doesn't give you anything, but let's understand this way. In this, right? So this is your network address. So in this network, if all of your machines will be having this as their starting address. Then this address is your network address. Right? So this whole stuff is your IP address, mission IP address. In that, it is telling you that in this network, your mission address is 125. This is, you can consider as a host address. It is something like, you can say in Bangalore, right, so and so layout, so and so street, right, so and so house number. Like that, this is its network address, followed by this is the mission address. So if this is the case, then your subnet mask could be something like 255.255.255.0, right, usually. So if you, so in this case, if you see the usable IP addresses, in which case if we are using subnet mask something like 255.255.255.0, then the possible IP addresses are come from 1 to 255. Means the mission addresses can be 1 to 255. Okay, na? So in that mission addresses, usually, let me tell you that 192.168.1.1 will be your DHCP or your any network device, let's say router, right? Your router might have this address, for example, right? This address, which address? This one. Okay, na? I am trying to give you the very basic level of understanding about networking, right? If you are really good in networking, maybe whatever I am telling you looks like wrong, but don't go into that mode of right or wrong. Try to understand at very high level how the network looks like in a simple way to understand, right? So now let's once again one more basic understanding what we should have. Our network addresses, any address should be in between 0 to 255, then dot 0 to 255, then again dot 0 to 255, right, dot 0 to 255. It will be in 4 sets as you are seeing there, right? It will be in 4 sets. This is 1, 2, 3 and 4, right? So is it making sense here? 1, 2, 3 and 4. This is your IP address. I am talking about IPv4. IP addresses follows one of the protocol is IPv4 version 4. IP protocol version 4. So those IP addresses follows this mechanism, right? In your company, if you have observed, in your company, your machines are having some IP address, maybe looks like something like, how can any one of you tell me that your IP address looks like, your machine IP addresses in your environment? Let's say 10.1.1.5 or any of this sort. Right? Yes, any confirmation? How your IP addresses are looking like in your company? So for example, you are never observed that, right? When you connected to your company network, right? You can check if it is Windows machine. We talked about Windows button plus or run window, type there CMD, then we asked you to type IP config, right? Will give you the IP address. If it is Linux machine or Unix type of machines or Mac, you can use if config, right, which will show you the IP address. So next day, tomorrow when you are coming, at least note it down that IP address, right? Not tomorrow, basically Monday right? So note down your IP address, at least we have some idea about the IP address now. So that follows the same principle, that number should be 0 to 255. Okay, so let's coming back here. So in the 0 to 255, if we see the last address, if it is 0 to 255, means technically there are 1 to 255 addresses are there, right? In that 255 right, one is used and even 255 is used, just I lost, right? 255 is also used. And if you are using any Cisco type of switches for any chance, for example, that guy will be using one more IP address in that network. If it is a Cisco switch is there, the switch we talked about here, right? The switch also will have IP address. If it is not configured, it will be taking this IP address as default. Default IP address Cisco will be this one, if it is Cisco. Similarly, if some other company is there, right, so that might take Netgear or any other switches, if we are talking about, that will take one more default address. Are we clear here? So one or the other way, in our given network, 2 or 3 IP addresses will be reserved for certain purposes or will be used for some different purpose. Okay, so you will be having certain limited number of IP addresses, if you are clear about it, right? So default gateway, as we said, like this one address is taken, that can be your gateway or router address. Okay, so there is one technical thing, if somebody really interested in, let's say like this, you have machines, right? These machines are there in the network, let's say. These machines, if they want to get any internet or outside network connectivity, these machines should go through something called router or a gateway, right? Here let me use that term. Even this one interchangeably people will be using it, router or gateway, but technically router is a device, switch kind of a device, router, and the IP address is whatever is given to that router, that IP address is actually considered as a gateway. Are we clear? Right now? Okay, na? So the gateway is the IP address and the router is the device. Okay. So I am actually seeing very less participation. Are you guys able to follow me? Okay. Done. So this is about network, right? LAN, you understood, local area network, where you have limited number of devices connected to a switch, right? As I told you this, right, this part. So if you have so many number of devices, means in your company, let's say there are 1,000 employees, then this type of IP addressing doesn't work out, where your subnet mask should be something like here also 0, right? Then in your company or in the network, the IP addresses can be something like this, can go beyond these numbers, something like from this number to 0.0 or 0.12, it can go up to 192.168.255.255, right? These many numbers will be available. So it starts from 0, 1, 2, 3 and so on up to 255. That is how they achieve bigger number of devices. Right? If we got it, so the network administrator will take care about how to configure all this inside your company network. That is not your job as a software engineer. Just we need to know there are certain types of IP addresses. In the IP address there is certain part we call as a network address, like that. Right? Those things, if we got it, done here. So if this is the story here, right, a bigger network, if it is like this, then the network address will be this much. Let me change the color. The network address will be this much. Then the host address will be dot something. Okay? So subnet mask, then default gateway, then primary DNS and secondary DNS. Okay? For this, we'll talk about a little story about these things. If we good, we step into the next topic. Into the networking side only, but little next topic. So we talked about the network addresses are limited. Whichever way you use it, the number of possible addresses are limited. Okay? So for that reason, for example, if you see a company problem, let's say they have 5,000 employees, right? All of them will be using their laptops, right? Right? If company is having, let's say, 2 shifts, right? 2 shifts. Then 5,000 employees plus another 5,000 employees. How many addresses they need? If they need like this, they need around 10,000 plus IP addresses they need, right? Yes or no? If they are giving each address to one machine, and they can use it, that IP address, right? Okay. So then they need more network configurations, more support, right? And it becomes more complex. So what is that they do is, basically, they use something called DHCP server, right? This guy is the one, right? DHCP server gives or allocates the IPs or IP addresses to the servers, not servers, to the, let's say, our laptops or personal computers, to our personal computers. This DHCP server will be allocating the IP addresses to our laptops. Okay? And this server manages some lease period. Okay, let's try to understand now. So let's say today I came to the office and I connected my laptop to the network, my desk. At my desk I am sitting. I connected my computer to the network. Okay, this first story. In the morning when I go to my office, I connect my laptop to the network. Yes? So now what happens? So my computer, once I plugged into the network, my computer, means my operating system, right, sends a signal called DHCP request or DHCP client request. It will send that request to the network. So what is that request called? DH client or DHCP client request. Okay, na? DHCP client request. Okay, to this request there will be a responsible service called a DHCP server, right? This guy, if it is DHCP server, this guy receives this request and responds to this request. Right? This DHCP client request will be addressed by your DHCP server by giving the IP address or by allocating the IP address to this newly connected machine in the network. Now this guy will give you the IP address. There will be a couple of steps, not only just one step, there will be a couple of steps. This will ask, okay, do you want this address? All that story will happen there, right? But let's see this. This guy gives this address. Okay, is that clear and done? No. Okay, now this part, if it is understood. So our computer, once we connect our computer to the network, our operating system which is running in the computer will send a DHCP client request to the DHCP server, and the DHCP server responds to the request by allocating or providing the IP address. Okay, so we talked about here there is something called a lease period, right? So for example, in our company, our network engineers are giving a lease period of 30 minutes, for example. What is that? 30 minutes. Right? Let's say I took my laptop, I disconnected here, I went to the meeting room, I sat there. In the meeting room also, if I connect to the network, I will be holding the same network address to my machine. If I don't connect my machine to the network in the meeting room, for example, I completed the meeting and it took, let's say, 40 minutes or 45 minutes, I came back and connected to my network. So that time, because the lease is expired, right, it is holding only 30 minutes. Because the lease is expired, now again my server asks the DHCP server, my laptop, right, my computer will again ask for the IP address. This guy can give the IP address, maybe that IP address same or maybe different one, it can allocate. Is that is understood? So that is where I asked you to note down your IP address in the company, whatever is given, right, at that moment in time. If you observe next day, again once you connect, if you check your IP address, that will be changed. So, right, this, it depends on the lease period. So if the company is running in multiple shifts, right, they will be using the lease period very aggressively, like 30 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that, they will use it. So that one shift is completed, lot of employees will go out, so there will be so many free IP addresses will be there, that will be allocated to the next set of requests. So DHCP client will be maintaining DHCP server will be maintaining that database, for which machine what IP address is given, which is free, which is leased out, all that it will be maintaining it. Okay. So any questions here about DHCP server? So why DHCP server? Because very limited number of addresses are there, especially the IP addresses, right? So that the network administrator who is working in our company as a network administrator, he will configure all this DHCP server, all these configurations, he will be doing it. So that he knows how many machines are there, how many free IP addresses are there, how many addresses are already allocated, all that he will be maintaining it. So as a software engineer, why do I need to know this concept? Why do I need to know this concept? So for example, tomorrow you go to office, you connected your laptop to the network and you are not getting network. So what is the first thing you do? You'll ask your colleague, is network is up? Yes, he will say, yes, network is up, I am able to connect. And you are trying to connect, it's not getting connected. So first thing, you should check the command what we talked about, IP address, right, if config or IP config, based on the type of machine you are using. if you are not getting any valid IP address. For example, in the Windows case, if you are not getting network, you will be seeing 169 something, 169 dot some random address you will get, 169 dot something. So that will tell you that your machine did not got any valid IP address. So that means you understood that. Now what is that request you should raise, right? You will raise a request to the network team, asking them or telling them, my machine is not getting IP address, something like maybe the IPs are not free, right? Can you please check it and let us know? Is that clear, right? It may be in a production environment, or it is in virtualized environment or a cloud environment where your machines are supposed to get certain IP addresses. That IP addresses are not getting allocated, right? Because maybe the IP addresses or limit is over, right? Especially if you think about cloud or any latest environments where the machines, they can create like hundreds of machines in no time. At least let's say virtual machines, if you are aware of that topic, else we learn that little later, right? So in that environment, certain machines doesn't get IP address, right? So that means your network is not having the required number of IP addresses, right? That concept falls under this DHCP concept. Right now, you guys are clear about it? Both of you? Right. Okay. So that reason we should know about this level of networking and DHCP server. Okay. So and okay, any mission, whether you are using the IP address, the next one is host name. Every machine will have IP address and host name. So to check that, you can use a command, host name, small letters. In the same machine you can type. You can check your machine name also. Right? Okay. So sorry. So now let's see here. I'm just opening. Okay. Got it. Right. Let me. Right. Now can you see here this one? Right. This is my Mac machine. If you are able to see here, right? Let me increase the size. Right. So here I am typing if config. This is what I am talking about. Right. Okay. This guy is like, so certain tools maybe I need to install there. Let me stop this. So now if you are seeing this right here, I'm typing here if config. Right. So once I type the if config, you are able to see certain IP addresses, right? This machine address is this one. Okay. So you can see again here the next to that subnet mask or network mask, you can see here, and there is a broadcast address. Okay, this is what I wanted to tell you this, right? Broadcast address, right? So this is loopback address or local address. So your machine will have that local address or local host address, right? And or loopback address it is called 127.0.0.1. So this is important, you should know it. Okay, so are you able to see? No, right? Sorry. So now we are able to see, right? Enter screen. Okay. So I'm talking about here multiple addresses. Let me once again run the command here. if config, right, to see my mission address. So here you are able to find my mission address is this one. This is the mission address, and this is the subnet mask what we are talking about, and this is the broadcast address, which is .255. So we talk about sometime like what is broadcast, right, unicast and all that stuff. Right, here you can see the loopback address, here this one 127.0.0.1, that is for every mission. Your laptop, my laptop, every laptop or every computer, every operating system predominantly will have this loopback address, which is called localhost address. Right? That is clear, right? Okay, that is the address. So there is something called MAC address. So can we see here MAC address or Ethernet address? Can we see here? Right? This is the one, which is the MAC address, the mission address. Right? So if we try to understand, right, every mission which is in the network will have, first thing is IP address, host name. For the network thing, there is something called MAC address. Okay, so MAC address basically it's a hexadecimal format. Okay, so we talked about host name, right? Let's try to see what is the host name here. Can we see here? Host name is a command. Enter. Can you see here? Labs JTsoft, right? This is the host name. So your mission also will have definitely one host name. So you can modify the host name, right? All that we can be able to do that. Right? I'm done. If you don't have any questions, we can wrap it up.